Good evening. Welcome to the regular scheduled Rossmoor Community Service District meeting for the month of October. This is October 11th, 2011. May we have a roll call, please, Mr. Rain?
Director Kaler?
Here.
Director Casey?
Here.
Director Rips?
Here.
Director Maynard?
Here.
President Coletta?
Here. Would you all stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have no presentations this evening. We have no additions to our agenda, so this is the time and place for any person in the audience who should like to comment to the Board of Directors concerning matters within our proper subject matter for us. Now would be your opportunity to speak. I'll remind you, you have 3 minutes, and also we cannot act on whatever comment you may make, but we're able to comment but not take action. So if there's anyone that should choose to speak to us, please approach the podium and give us your first and last name. And I think there's a sign-in sheet, if you'd be so kind to acknowledge your signature or print your name as well, so we have a record of who spoke. Okay, seeing none, we'll move.
There's one.
There is one. There's
Okay.
one.
Hi, Michael Bullock, 11291 Davenport Road, Rossmoor, B-U-L-L-O-C-K. Just glancing, I've just been taking a look at this case study summary, and do I take it to imply that I guess the Rossmoor County is Rossmoor/County, and is there basically it costs less than $4,000? There's $120,000, $124,000 cost for the county, $120,000 for surplus for Rossmoor. Does that mean it's basically almost just $4,000 net cost, or what does that mean?
I'm going to defer that to the manager who's spent more time on it. I've only reviewed it in my with my abilities. Mr. Cabot has a far better grasp of interpreting this document, so I'm going to defer to him.
Mr. President, members of the board, I will report out on item D1 on this study, and we'll be able to articulate more fully what's contained in the report and what my observations are about that report. But to answer your quick question, county does in fact mean those county services that would be part of a consolidated city, that would transfer to a consolidated city.
A second question had to do,
Mr. President, like I said, we're going to fully explore this at D1, which is not far off.
Mr. Bullock, you want to hold off your questions? You can ask them when we get to that matter.
No, I just had another question.
With regard to the same topic?
No,
Okay,
another
go
topic.
ahead. Go ahead.
With regard to law enforcement, I know at one point the response time was around 11 minutes. And then I know during our campaign for cityhood, it dropped to about 4.5 minutes, 5 minutes average response time. I don't know, that's at least what I had heard through. Do we have any clue currently what the response time is for the sheriff?
Well, it
Average,
varies.
mean?
It varies from my recollection from quarter to quarter because there aren't a lot of priority one calls to this community. So to answer your question, it's somewhere in the realm of what you've just said, 4 to 5 minutes. But sometimes there's an aberration, and it's higher than that.
Okay.
And sometimes it's better, but the frequency of which it's better, my recollection is it's far less than
It used to be.
it is when it's a lot longer response time. But I think Mr. Chabot, I think the lieutenant or the captain will be speaking next month on statistics and some of the questions we posed last month.
You've already, Mr. President, members of the board, you've already had your first fiscal quarter report in the month of September. Then it's October, November, it'll be December.
So if you come back in December, we'll see how it compares to the last quarter than the same time last year There'll be a comparison chart.
In terms of mean response time.
Right,
Okay, thank you.
sure. Okay. Seeing no others, let's proceed to your report, Mr. Taboada.
Mr. President, members of the board, as I usually report on governance, the report for this board meeting is basically a summary of the actions taken at your special meeting last month. There has been a development since that the staff report was prepared, and that is this case study that was referred to by a resident during public forum. The title of this case study is Case Study, and it includes Los Alamitos, Seal Beach, and Rossmoor, and it's an administrative draft fiscal analysis dated June 18th, 2011, submitted to the Local Agency Formation Commission and prepared by GST Consulting. You may recall that GST Consulting was the firm that did the CFA, or the Comprehensive Financial Analysis, for the application on incorporation. What's puzzling about this particular study is the date, and that is that it has resided within LAFCO since June 18th of this year. And it only surfaced when a local news agency, OC 180 News, made a direct request of Supervisor Morlock and his Chief of Staff, Rick Francis, about where is the data that has been promised for so many months and perhaps years, which would demonstrate that Rossmoor was a drain on the committee, on the county, and that the application for latent powers would not pencil out. We have heard repeatedly that the drain supposedly on the county from Rossmoor adds $600,000 per year. This study, while it is not a study of Rossmoor itself, it basically folds in Rossmoor with Seal Beach and with Los Alamitos, but it does provide some insight into the thought process that goes into an analysis of this type. Now, before I go any further, let me just say that this is not a criticism of GST. GST can only report what is provided to them by the county. And so what I can say about his methodology is that he relies very heavily on assumptions, and assumptions that are not validated in this particular report. And again, it's a draft, it's a cursory analysis, it's not a final report, so it might change with further refinement, but we have to go with what we have. And what this report says on page 5 is that the Rossmoor CSD, when you compare revenues to expenditures, has a surplus or a net of $120,155. And that's not news, because we have reported to you every year annually what our net gain is on revenue from the county. What's interesting, though, is that Mr. Thompson, has provided a Rossmoor County figure, which is supposed to indicate that those monies that would become part of a super city of the three agencies. And what it shows there for the county, that is the county portion, it shows a revenue of $1,337,000, expenses of $1,461,000, and a net loss of $124,000. That's a far cry from the $600,000 that's been we've heard for so long. Now, as I said, this report is not comprehensive, but it is illustrative. There's a chart that shows on page 6, and by the way, this will be on our website, so anybody, and there's a few copies that were available, but it's a large report, and it'll be on our website for anyone who wants to look at this in detail. On page 6, it shows the general fund expenditures, and it shows the salary benefit expenses as a percentage of total general fund expenditures. Seal Beach shows that ratio of 44%, Los Alamitos as 64%, Rossmoor as 28%, and the county that would only transfer that is, would only transfer money, is 99%. That absolutely shows that an efficiency for Rossmoor. One caveat, it does not include the general manager's position in the salary benefit expenditures because of the contract status of your general manager. But even when I factor that in, the district is still at 39% of salary benefit expenses to general fund, and that is still the lowest of the three agencies that are being evaluated. And it really does demonstrate the efficiency of this agency in terms of its fiscal competency and managerial competence. Another interesting tidbit here in this report under law enforcement, still on that page, there is an analysis of law enforcement that there would be economies of scale for consolidating three agencies. But here's the interesting statement. Current costs and staffing levels for the Rossmoor community were not available from the county. Therefore, an estimated cost has been developed for the Rossmoor community. The estimated cost was derived from available fiscal year 2007-2008 data and applying an annual 4% cost escalator factor to fiscal year 2010-2011. Not very scientific. The telling statement there is the county data wasn't available. So what other county data wasn't available for purposes of this report?
Well, going back to the CFA, Mr. Taboada, testing your memory, I need to have my memory free. I don't recall the county being able to supply the requisite data for the 2007-2008 fiscal comprehensive analysis, which was a requirement with the application for incorporation.
What they did provide in that report was an estimate of about $950,000, $980,000 for cost, but no estimate at all on revenue. So if you don't have the revenue to offset against the cost, then you don't have a net cost of service. This at least is an attempt to do that, but it's still very, the data is problematic. Moving on, there's a table on page 8, which is a debt and long-term liabilities table, and it shows that Seal Beach has total debt of almost $40 million, 39 and change. Los Alamitos, 49 or 5 million, and then somehow he attaches a debt of $3,662,630 to Rossmoor. Excuse me, but Rossmoor has no debt. This is pass-through accounting for the Rossmoor Wall and for Rush Park, and it's not a debt of the district. So to simply total that into a table to try to demonstrate what the relative debt and long-term debt and long-term liabilities of the three agencies, to me, just does not compute. There's a whole lot more material that's contained in this, and as I said, it will be on the website, and I've provided you, the board, with my analysis of it, and if you have any questions regarding this, I'd be happy to address those for you.
Mr. Bullock, do you want to re-ask your question, or is that answered? Thank you. Anyone else have questions in the audience? Sir, please.
Yeah, my name is Al Parrish, a resident of Rossmoor for 44 years. My only question is to the manager here. Is your analysis going to be included on the website?
If the board wishes me to push and put it on there, I'll be happy to do so.
I think if it goes up, it will be tentative. It would be based upon what's submitted here. Obviously, as this document, if it does evolve, then it would be only fair to allow appropriate comment as the document has a life unto itself. You would agree, wouldn't you?
I just want to know if his analysis is going to be on the website. That's a simple question.
Yes, and I gave you a response, and I've also asked...
I'm sorry, I don't understand your response about that document.
Yes, if this document evolves into further detail, supportive documentation, references that validate the assumptions, I think you would be open-minded to any additional comments, criticisms, or constructive comments the manager or anyone else might have.
I'm sorry, you know, I just simple question. I just want to know, he said he had an analysis.
Right, and you couldn't answer my question either, could you?
Will we get to see it?
You couldn't answer my question, could you? I answered your question.
Well, I don't understand it, I'm
No,
sorry.
of course not. This is the second time you've done that.
What's the problem?
Sir, I answered your question, and I said if this document evolved, I asked you if you'd be open-minded to additional comments. So apparently you've locked into something, and you don't have an open mind to additional comments as the document evolves. Anyone else? Okay. Any other comments, Mr. Talbotto?
Unless there's questions from the board.
Not at this time for me.
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you for the report, Mr. Talbotto. Now we move to the consent calendar. If anyone wishes on the board to remove one of the items, now would be the time to do so.
Nope.
None? Okay. Then all in favor of the consent calendar, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, consent calendar is approved. Next, we move to resolutions. Mr. Talbotto?
We're at item G1, Mr. President.
Yes, G1.
Thank you. What you have before you, Mr. President, members of the board, is a resolution number 11-10-11-01, which we're asking you to read the title only and waive further reading as follows. A resolution of the Board of Rossmoor Community Services District's denial of application for leave to present a late claim. Some time back, we received a claim, a claim for compensation for medical expenditures from someone who tripped and fell on a sidewalk, which is located in the city of, in the community of Rossmoor. The resident lives in Seal Beach, but the sidewalk was in Rossmoor. The individual filed a claim with the county and with the city of Los Alamitos. Los Alamitos denied the claim, saying it's not in our jurisdiction. The county also denied the claim, stating that because the district was responsible for trees, and that damage claim should accrue to the district. Before we were able to bring it on the docket for you for rejection of the claim, we were advised by our insurance carrier, SDRMA, that the claim was not untimely. So they then informed the claimant that it was untimely. They then filed an application for leave to file a late claim. That late claim is in the hands of SDRMA, and by denial of this application for a late claim, they will then turn that over to their attorneys to work with the claimant's attorney, who has filed on behalf of the applicant, to see if there are any liability for the district. My initial impression of this is that, number one, it's untimely, but secondly, that the district is not responsible for sidewalks, it is the county. And so they should be the logical agency to have to deal with this claim. So if you would undertake a motion to approve the resolution, we can move this matter.
Is there a motion tonight?
So motioned.
Second.
Okay, I think this is a matter where a roll call is required.
If you'd like a roll call, we can certainly do that.
Please.
Director Kaler?
So a yes, a yes vote is for the denial of the application?
That's correct, sir.
Yes.
Director Casey?
Yes.
Director Rips?
Yes.
Director Maynard?
Yes.
President Coletta?
Yes. Okay. All right, the resolution passes. Now we go to the regular calendar. H1, the citizen request regarding parking analysis.
Correct, sir. Mr. President, members of the board, item H1 is a citizen request to include as part of your agenda the Rossmoor parking analysis. As you may know, the district has been engaged with the LAGSL, the Los Alamitos Girls Softball League, and with residents of the Rossmoor Park neighborhood to negotiate and to develop a comprehensive memorandum of understanding that will set forth all the rules and regulations dealing with the use of the park by the LAGSL. The individual who filed this claim, Mr. Zeitz, is it Zeitz or Zeitz?
Zeitz.
Zeitz. Mr. Zeitz attempted during the negotiations to introduce an issue with regard to the use of the park as opposed to the use by the LAGSL for the use of the park. Mr. Zeitz was informed that this was an issue outside the scope of the MOU process, since the LAGSL had little or nothing to do with the district's administration of its park facilities. Mr. Zeitz then asked how he could get this measure before the board, and so I informed him that under board policy he could bring this matter to the board's attention, and that you would direct me as you saw fit on how to proceed with his presentation and his request as a result of that presentation. I've advised you that it would be good practice for this matter to be directed back to the general manager for a report back to the board, since only one of you have been actively engaged in this MOU process, and that matter be held over until after the approval process for the MOU, which is now scheduled for your November meeting. Mr. President, that's my report, and I stand ready to answer your questions.
Does the board have any comments before we address Mr. Zeitz? Mr. Zeitz?
Gentlemen on the board, President Coletta. Yeah, this is a presentation that I put together to try to demonstrate in a very factual manner the situation that we're faced with over at Pemberton Park. The MOU that Henry was referring to, it was clear that no park policies could be addressed in those meetings, and so this is addressing a park policy issue, so it's a distinctly different item. All right, so here's a little Google Earth satellite view of our park. There's a number of recreational activities in this park, and I'm going to be talking about the allocation of parking that is the parking assets that you have at your disposal. Just like I have parking assets at my home, code requires them. You have parking assets at your facility here. So you'll see all of the different uses that are available in this park. There are tennis courts, picnic areas, the basketball courts. I had them all listed on all the different assets that you have at the park that need parking facilities. And how many parking spaces do we have supporting this acreage and all of these demands on parking? You've got a total of 59 parking spaces around the park, including the handicap and the RCSD authorized for the vehicle that they've got. I've got it broken down by the street that they are all on, and of course it's all very verifiable. All right, so how many parking spaces do we need to support these kind of park uses that we are trying to promote within the facility, the community? Tennis courts, picnic areas, basketball courts, play areas, all of these are based off of a code research, and these are all based off of Long Beach, a very nearby city, very complete set of zoning codes in Long Beach. The county has reviewed all of this data. The planning office, it was Ms. Lang, the manager of the Orange County Planning Department, and has validated all of my findings and those numbers. So I went to them for some help on some research, and they helped me out on that. So all of the items that you see here, the tennis courts and the basketball courts, you take the number of spaces that should be allocated. If you were to be building tennis courts today, you would be required by, in the city of Long Beach, by code to have that many parking spaces. We have a need of 58 spaces just for all of the activities on the park, less the fields. So we can talk about the softball fields. We've got 3 softball fields. And baseball fields and softball fields are one thing that Long Beach does not have a code on. The great state of Pennsylvania has a code. Pasadena has a very dramatic code. You wouldn't want to even entertain the number of spaces that Pasadena feels is needed for a baseball field. So I put together, that's really the only thing that's subject to input and scrutiny as far as just documentation, an analysis that you'll get on page 5 here of what it takes to support a baseball field, a softball field, baseball field. So you'll see that from that analysis, I predict that you need about 118 spaces. And so we have a park needs of 176 spaces for 3 fields. Now, you need to consider not just the real estate, but the true use of the real estate. And the true use of the real estate is when you have a team playing, you've got more teams staged getting ready to play. That's just a fact, and it puts more, compounds the parking issue. The 118 spaces was just the teams playing, and that's teams playing. I am first one to say that if it's a practice, dramatic difference between a game and a practice. A practice has a coach and one set of team, very little spectators. It is almost a non-issue when 3 practices are going on in the park. This is a game situation that I'm discussing here. So we can go into the next slide. I'll show you. Here's our comparables. Over here in the joint base, there's 166 dedicated parking spaces to support these 4 fields. One of those is a little tiny pony field. You can barely see it down there. Bottom line is there's 42 parking spaces allocated per field. Come back to here, we've got 0.33 parking spaces allocated per field. Let's go on over to Arnold Park over here in Cypress. These are all fields that have multiple diamonds available to them. Not single diamonds. I picked up fields that are in a very local area that have multiple diamonds. Here over in Arnold, there's got basketball courts and a roller hockey rink, and they've got 56 parking spaces per field. 189 dedicated spaces as broken down. Certainly more parking assets to their availability than we have. So here's the background. We've got, you've heard numerous complaints over the years of the congestion, the crowding going on at the park during game time situation. It's nothing new, you've all experienced it. Even member of the boards have tried to come there and they know that you have to park far away and walk to the park at times. So improvements have been made. We can list them, but there's some other issues that are compounding, and some of the enforcement policies, some of the different technologies that are available. We have a lot more noise with the aluminum bats and the pitching machines that were back in the day unaffordable, and the wood bats were a lot quieter too. Wow, somebody gave me some nice. All right, so recommended solutions. It's not a matter of the park. The park is what it is. It's been there. We're not changing the park. At least I'm not proposing we change the park. It's the policies that generate the use of the park that need to be considered and modified. If left to just a community park, there is no parking issue. When you start permitting that fills the park up and then some, it's the permitting practices and the policies that govern those permitting practices that affect the true impact of our neighborhood over there. As I said, if the park was only permitted for practices, you would not be hearing me and you wouldn't be having all of the issues from the Rossmoor Park residents, because the practice is almost no impact to the neighborhood. It can easily absorb the parking requirements of all 3 fields having practices. So I'm not here to try to disparage any particular organization that use the fields. We could actually use the fields and not permit the other sections. We could keep the basketball courts free and the tennis courts and to allow it. So there's a number of different possibilities, although I don't know if they're probabilities, to approach the situation. But I just want the board to be aware that in just a simple analysis, you don't have but 56 parking spaces to work with over there. And then if you want to count the street parking, go ahead and double that. You've got 100 parking spaces. When you've got 3 diamonds going off on a Saturday and all the tennis courts full and the basketball courts and people are picnicking, you need over 200 parking spaces. Just so you have a concept of what is going on over there as far as traffic congestion. And your permitting policies can be altered to change that situation. It's not a county traffic issue. We're not going to put in 2-lane roads there. If the permits were ceased, the traffic would cease. And I'm not suggesting that whatsoever, I'm just for demonstration. So I would like to make one recommendation. Henry asked me to bring it up, the parking signs that were posted around there. I don't know how to make a request that the board review them. Throughout the park, little signs were put up, says you can't park here from Friday to Saturday morning. And although the intentions were perhaps honorable, the actual execution of that has been kind of a non-issue. We now just have signs in the park that we don't need because anybody that might have parked there will just park on the street. It was, we're not sure exactly what was gained other than having eyesores in the park, and even Henry, I think, is willing to consider taking the signs down, but needs to have a request that the board could actually action him to do that. Otherwise, I don't know how that could happen. So I added that based on our conversations. So I'm open for, here's my softball field parking analysis. Number of players, number of coaches, scorekeepers, all the people that it takes to support a game, the number of people that are shown up. And by the way, it is Pasadena requires, I think, 45 parking spaces per field. The great state of Pennsylvania, which was easy to find, was 35. I just did an analysis based on vehicle occupancy and came up with 39.4. Call it 30. You could call it 5 parking spaces. And when you've got 0.33 dedicated per field, even that is stresses our parking assets. So I appreciate your time. I'm here to answer any questions. Otherwise, I just leave you with the data that's verifiable, rather scientific. It kind of is what it is.
Okay, does anyone have comments, questions?
I have a question. The signs are there for overnight parking. Mr. Tabuada?
About 2 years ago, Henry can recall exactly when, some signs were posted, metal signs throughout the park.
Right, I've seen them.
Yeah, and the intent was, I guess, to clear the park so that in the Saturday morning, people that come to use the park would not be obstructed in parking. And
That was also my understanding.
yeah, and there may have been 1 or 2 cars that were consistent violators, but even those signs just had them move perhaps the car 20 feet, and it didn't increase or decrease any available parking on Saturday morning. So the net effect of the signs was nil. And so now we've got these nice ugly signs throughout the park that aren't really effective. And
Okay, yeah, now I understand your point.
Right.
No, I do not.
Well, thank you for the information. And I'm sure that this will circle back for consideration at some point.
True. When you review your park permitting policies is when this data would become valuable to you, and you could set some sort of guidelines that would be equally and fairly applied to anybody that requests to use the park.
Mr. Zeitz, if you should have information as an example on the genesis of Arnold Park, they had a number of spaces that they would dedicate for hockey or basketball or both. In your presentation, if you in the future have time to present some of that information as backup information?
They have 2 basketball courts, and using Long Beach code, I derived how many spaces need to be allocated to support the basketball courts, how many parking spaces are per existing Long Beach code would.
Okay, I misunderstood you.
Yeah, and so when I accounted for the basketball courts, when I accounted for the roller hockey, how many field spaces were left to support these 3 diamonds was where I was headed. And they've got 56 spaces per field out of that total 189 parking lot that they've got.
You mentioned as well another community, Pasadena. They had a very cumbersome or complicated formula
No, it's actually just a requirement for the baseball time. As a matter of fact, their entire parking requirements are off the chart, and I wouldn't even have included, I'd be embarrassed to use them. They had, for a tennis court, they had 8 parking spaces. Now, I don't see how 8 parking spaces would be needed unless you're going to have spectators on a tennis court. So I found Long Beach...
4 playing and 4 waiting to play.
Going ball boy, line judge.
I guess. I found the Long Beach code to be much more even-keeled, and it covered all park uses.
All right, as you accumulate more information, if you wish to submit it, we'll be open to it.
Yeah, I'm curious about the park policy review process and how often it comes up and how often you review your policies and how this data could be affect some of those policies. I'm unsure how to affect policy based on the data.
In some respects, as it's appropriate, you know, sometimes something occurs that warrants revisiting an old policy, and sometimes it comes up every 2 years.
Okay.
So-
Because I would like the policy, of course, that the manager consider the parking available as an asset to be used when making the permitting. Because currently, we are completely oversubscribed in that park at certain times of the year.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. President, members of the board, just to bring closure to this, it would be appropriate for you to refer this back to me for report in the future. And it won't be an extended future. We'll get to it and get it to you as soon as it's practicable.
All right, I think that would be
That makes very good sense.
yes, I agree, appropriate.
Definitely concur.
And then thank you. And now we go to
I have
H2.
a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Michelle.
Sorry.
Curling.
I'm Michelle Fieldson, Pemberton Road. I just wanted to address that a little bit. This did come up in our MOU negotiations, and Mr. Tabawada did tell us that it was outside the scope of the MOU. And I just would like to say that this is something that the neighbors have been addressing for years and years and been trying to make a point that the congestion, the noise, but mostly the safety factor for the traffic around the park would be an issue. And we kept hoping that nothing would happen, and as it turned out, a young girl was hit on Hedwig, and now we have a homeowner that is being sued. And when we addressed this with Mr. Tabawada, he said the congestion, the traffic, the parking is not an RCSD issue, that it is a county issue. The county has said, no, it is an RCSD issue because of the permitting of the park, which brings about the congestion around the park. And while there could be a case made, I suppose, for Hedwig, I think we'd be hard-pressed to speak to the county that the congestion on Pemberton, Baskerville, and Kurth is a result of county practices. I'm not sure that we want to get in a spitting match with the county, but I believe their resources are greater than ours, and while we may believe that there's no liability, should something terrible happen and somebody gets hit, I don't think it's unrealistic to think that the RCSD could become a named defendant in a lawsuit, and I think it is a potential liability, and although we may feel that there's no responsibility, there's still those costs incurred with defending an action where we believe we would be innocent. So I do think that that needs to be considered in future decisions as well. Thank you.
Distinguished board members and Manager Tabawada. I'm Bob Labrador. I've been up here a few times speaking before. I just wanted to take a few minutes. Some of you know I was a director of the American Youth Soccer Organization and locally for many years, and toward the end of which Henry remembers me coming into his office to put in field permits. We had this exact same problem in soccer, and we were using far more facilities just because we had about 2,000 kids playing every year. We found out the only practical and reasonable solution for this exact same problem was simply to disperse and spread out the games to accommodate it and reduce that terrible parking problem. So we ended up basically trying to get as many facilities as we could. That included the high school, Los Alamitos High School, as well as Laurel Continuation School, Oak and McCullough Middle Schools, all of the elementary schools here at Rossmoor, and Arbor Park. So you know, I know traditionally the girls softball league has always played at Rossmoor, and I know, you know, it's just, but they've gotten very accustomed to always having everything centralized there. They've got their snack bar, and of course, you know, everybody, they got all the referees and the umpires there. But I think it maybe, it would behoove them to consider, perhaps, and it's something Henry can think about, is perhaps moving one of the fields to where, to another facility that probably could accommodate reducing that parking problem at Rossmoor Park. And I would suggest perhaps even right here, you know, moving one field here at Rush Park, plenty of parking. It would reduce the problem by 1/3. And I think by the figures that the speaker pointed out, that could go a long ways. It may not completely solve the problem, but could greatly reduce that congestion. That's all.
Thank you. Okay. Then we'll move on to H2.
Can we have a motion to refer it back to the general manager?
Yes, anyone make a motion?
I'll motion to refer back to the general manager.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. H2, the policy 2150.
Mr. President, members of the board, as you know, our park superintendent has commenced a lengthy medical leave. Should last approximately 2 months, maybe longer, depending on how the situation resolves itself. And we're recommending to the board that an individual who assumes the duties of a higher classification receive some form of compensation for the time that that individual is performing those duties. And I must stress that we're talking about a higher classification, not simply cross-training and desk jobs that pretty much have the same salary or benefit package. In this particular case, the part-time recreation leader is going to assume those duties of the park superintendent for at least 2 months. And I think that it's appropriate that that individual be compensated to some degree for taking on those duties, going from full-time, half-time to full-time, and actually taking on a much higher level of responsibility. So I'm recommending to the board that policy number 2150 be amended by adding section 2150 out of classification pay, which reads, employees assigned to work in a higher classification on a temporary basis, which exceeds 7 or more continuous workdays, shall be paid out of classification pay. This amount shall be 15% of the employee's normal compensation, not to exceed the rate of pay for the position temporarily being filled. It's a very common practice in local government to compensate employees who undertake these higher class duties, and I recommend your approval for first reading.
All right, as a first reading, does anyone have any comments?
Well, this seems to make very good sense to me in terms of the policy that's used by different cities that have this in place currently. And I actually feel we probably should have had something like this all along had we been aware of that.
I believe, Director Casey, this is the first time that we've actually had an individual who is going to assume duties of a higher classification.
Correct. I'm sure it is.
God bless you.
Thank you. Henry, since this is a first read and it's going to take a second read, when is this transition going to take place?
As we speak.
So are we going to do, we have to approve this at some point,
you could waive second reading if you chose to.
And if not, would there be retroactive, or how?
We could, if you direct me to do that, yes.
I'm not sure we should waive the first read, but I definitely would want this to be retroactive to when it starts.
I'm in concurrence with that.
Mr. Tabwada, would this cover any employee additional benefits? Well?
Only to the extent that this particular employee is now a half-time employee and will go to full-time employment, which has a different level of benefit package for full-time employees. It's not much.
Okay.
So does the board want this to come back for a second reading, or do we want to waive a second reading, or do we want to have the second reading, have it go retroactive? What's the motion?
There was, there was an issue once before we wanted to not have a second read, and seemed to be there was some community uprising regarding that. And I think just for continuity and consistency of our policies, that I guess I'd make a motion that we accept this as a first read, and then we can bring it back as a second read, and that, I don't know, I guess it's a separate motion, but I want to ensure that there is retroactive pay assigned to this. So would that be a second, or we would vote on that later, or how would that work?
Director Rips, you could do that as part of your motion for second reading.
Next time?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the second reading would happen at the November board meeting?
Correct.
And then just following your thought process, you would want any action if it was a yes pass to be retroactive to whenever the change happened, October 10th, 11th, whatever, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
How long is the employee going to be absent?
It's hard to say. It's a maternity leave, and it depends on too many factors for me to guesstimate. It's estimated at 2 months, but it could be longer.
Right.
Sure.
Well, I think we all want to do justice by this and not take too long.
That's where this is either best practices or it's not.
Right.
And we have someone's livelihood, and we have a transition that's taking place right now. As long as we can make sure that everyone is covered, I'm okay with the second read, but I'm also okay with the read as is as well.
Well, is there a second to Mr. Rips? Because we need to have a second.
I'll second his motion.
All right, let's have further discussion on whether we amend, maybe there's a friendly amendment, I don't know. What's your comment, Mr. Mayor?
Pardon?
Why don't you restate your comment?
My comment is if this is best practice, this is something we should do. If we're thinking we need more time to look over it, I understand prudence, but I also want to make sure that this individual who is stepping up for more responsibility is covered.
I think the policy for second read is not specifically if we are going to have a different view, but to give the community an opportunity to come out and voice their opinion as well.
Okay.
I'm completely think that we should do this, but I think that we have had a policy about having first reads and second reads, and community members have stepped forward and said, something when, I don't remember the exact situation, but we're going to skip a second read because it was pretty much, yeah, this is a great thing, let's move forward, and they were not happy about it. And I think since we can make this a retroactive next month so that he will get what's coming to him, what he deserves, I think we're able to do right by our employee and also do right by the community.
I see your point. So in other words, in the spirit of transparency for the community.
Correct.
Now that I understand. I'm new to this first read, second read stuff.
Director Maynard, once upon a time, policy development was done by a citizen committee, and it was their thought that, much like an ordinance which requires 2 readings, that a policy change ought to at least have that 1 month in between in order to evaluate the consequences of doing so or not doing so.
Okay.
All right, any other comments? All right.
Nope.
Then the motion as stated, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, no opposition, the motion carries. All right, there is no, are there any general manager items?
Mr. President, members of the board, as you know, we're in the process of reconstructing 2 of our tennis courts. Demolition took place yesterday. Rebar and other things that attended to getting it ready for cement pour took place today. The cement pour is scheduled for tomorrow. We have staff and engineers on site to make sure that the work is done properly and that it will stand the test of time. We've had not a lot, but we've had a few inquiries from community members asking, why are we doing this? The tennis courts are perfectly okay. There's nothing wrong with them. I'm going to ask Chris Argueta to show you the rebar that was discovered under one of these tennis courts. Now, there's 3 pieces that he's going to show you. One is the new rebar that's being installed. The other one is the rebar that was in place but was still doing its job. And then the third one shows you the deterioration that's taken place in some parts of the tennis courts. What this demonstrates is that water has in fact penetrated the underlayment of the concrete, has caused cracking and deterioration of the surface, and is in fact compromised the quality of the surface to the point where it could become a safety factor, if not already. So the work that's being performed is deemed to be appropriate and responsible. Based on the fact that we had to demolish portions of 2 of the courts, and the cement pour is tomorrow, then there's a 28-day period for curing for that cement, which takes us into November. Then there's a couple of 3 days for the contractor to apply the surface coating, and for us to reinstall the nets. So we're looking perhaps at the 3rd week of November before those courts are available for use by the public.
Sounds like happy Thanksgiving.
So we alert the public, and we apologize for the added time for this, but as a TV personality keeps telling me over and over again, do it right the first time. In fairness, these courts were poured in 1979 and have withstood the test of time for that period of time, and it's just now time to get them back into first-class condition.
How many inquiries about the complaints and why are we doing? How many have you
That I'm
received?
aware of 2.
Just 2?
But I thought it was important that we at least get that message out, that we're not doing this just because it wasn't an idle decision, and certainly we feel that it's an appropriate decision to go ahead with this repair.
Can we take pictures of the rebar and actually put it on our website so they can see the corroded one, or I don't know what the right word is, but...
Well, we have the rebar, and we also showed you pieces of concrete that had chipped off, so yeah, we'll take a picture of it and put it up there. And that'll help explain to the public why it's going to take so long before these courts are back in action. We encountered a situation yesterday where, while they were hammering out the concrete, ran across a conduit that was not on the plans that feed the lights. It was severed.
Wow.
We had it repaired today, and we'll now more or less draw this conduit onto the plans so that we know in the future where it is.
Do you think it might help if we had some sort of signage or a sign that stated that due to unforeseen circumstances, the courts will not be available as we had originally planned, or do you think that's some sort of an overkill
Well, when we
to do something like that?
Director Casey, when we put in the pictures with the rebar and the cement chips, we'll certainly can put some information about that if it's not on there already. The regular tennis patrons call in regularly to get a status on it.
I'm sure.
And we have a sign posted in our office, and I think we have
Okay.
have them posted on our bulletin boards.
So the information is there for the community to have it available to them.
For the most part, and if not
Okay,
all the way, then we'll take care of that.
fair enough.
Anything else, sir?
That's all I have, sir.
Okay, how about the board? Any items the board want to address?
Oh, yeah. This is our time now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, a couple things. One, I want to thank you, Van, for taking the time and effort to represent your neighborhood, to take the diligence of actually seeking out county advice, doing the research, to provide the document for us. Thank you for coming out and speaking on behalf, as well as you. Thank you for your time. This week, or I should say recently, we've now gotten our second new edition of the RH newsletter. Again, each time I look at it, it looks better and better and better. Even have a national brand advertiser in there. Very good. This week, OC 180 did a couple of interesting stories about our future governance, about what's going on. And on one of their articles, Rossmoor Shopping Village annexation by Los Alamitos, an editorial opinion. They gave their opinion, which tended to favor Rossmoor, but they did talk about Mr. Morlock and how completing the annexation was and is still his highest priority for the next year. So for anyone who's on the Preservation Committee of Rossmoor, please know that you're going against the #1 objective of our current county supervisor.
Yeah.
Lastly, in this article, Rick Francis goes in and makes a quote that says, although carving out such a small area is not the optimal result we are hoping for, it is a consistent step in the direction we're going to address islands as a whole. So that's basically admitting that this is just the first step of future annexation. I would hope people in the community read this. I would hope there's a certain amount of outrage, and hopefully join in on the Preservation Committee to protect us. Lastly, on another article called New Financial Analysis, he says that we will enjoy better local government representation. This is, again, Morlock's chief of staff, if you will. And on this one here, I definitely agree, because I don't think John Morlock is a very good representative for us. So on that part, I do agree with Mr. Francis's take. Another last thing that I want to talk is Mr. Edgar, Mayor Pro Tem of Los Alamitos, has announced his intentions to running for Congress, which is interesting. And I know that he probably watches these things, and it's going to be interesting because this is going to be a definitely stronghold for the Democrat Party. I believe he runs as a Republican. And I hope that he knows that any predatory actions that he takes on Los Alamitos will probably be remembered, and that Rossmoor has a high propensity towards voting, and that he might want to consider backing off some of his intentions, because he's going to need votes of Rossmoor's to get elected if he's even close to being a candidate. And then lastly, tennis courts, anyone. I'm glad that we're doing the right thing. You build a court in '79. I know it's painful to have an escalation in a project. I've been experiencing that with my own home remodel. But bottom line, this is Rossmoor. We deserve to have good courts. We deserve to have the infrastructure that's going to last a lifetime. I think we're doing the right thing. I'd also encourage the staff to think of a grand reopening event, and let's announce this, that we're actually going to have a world-class facility that's not going to puddle up, that's going to be built right this time and brought up to the new standards that are out there. So those are my thoughts for the day.
Message received.
I'm not quite sure I can follow that. But, the only thing I have tonight is I've been participating in the MOU process with our Rossmoor residents here, and they have brought up, or in conversation has been brought up several issues that I think would be warrant consideration and discussion at the CIP level of the board. So I would just, I guess I'm requesting that we set up a meeting so we can actually start discussing those items and see where they can be in our process.
We're looking at the calendar as we speak.
Okay. All right.
Well, even though Director Maynard touched on this briefly, I want to remind the community that the Rossmoor Preservation Committee is still looking for volunteers to help with some of their very, very worthwhile activities in terms of making sure that Los Alamitos does not annex the Rossmoor shopping village. And since, you know, we're all in this together, they would greatly appreciate any help they can get with their activities. And secondly, at the recent ISTOC quarterly meeting, General Manager Taboada and I had a chance to speak briefly with John Withers and Charlie Wilson, board members of LAFCO, and even though we didn't get to talk to them for too long, they seem to be quite sympathetic with the issues that Rossmoor is having with LAFCO, so I'm hoping in some way that we can count on their support in the future as an ally in some of the activities that we're going to be dealing with LAFCO and the County of Orange in our future endeavors. And that's all I have.
Well,
Mr. Kaler,
I can't top any of these things yet, but I will do my best. First of all, I just want to commend you, President Coletta, and you as past and President Rips. That I think our meetings have been fabulous. I mean, it's going to be 8:15, and we're going to be done. And I just remember stories about board meetings that would go till 11 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
And would just go on and on and on. And I think this is actually great for the public because they can actually show up and not be, I'm afraid that they're going to die listening to meetings for the whole night. So I think it's fantastic that we're able to blaze through meetings, ask real pertinent questions, get great feedback, and then go on to the next topic. And I just want to thank you for your very good leadership on that. I also want to wish good luck to our park employee, Emily, while she's out. I wish her the best in that endeavor.
No new arrival yet.
What's that?
No new arrival yet.
Well, hopefully it's all going to turn out great. On the November 3rd week launch of the tennis courts, I agree with Director Maynard that there should be some type of an event. I don't know what it is, but something to say, hey, look, we just made the courts great for the community, but I'm open to hearing. Under the Rossmoor Under Siege label here, you know, a lot of talk has been given and a lot of attention has been given to the corner being annexed, but we also have our friendly neighbors to the south, Seal Beach, with a lot of fantastic items that they want to do to us. If any of you were listening to any of their board meetings or attending their board meetings from last night, then you obviously know that they want to do some rezoning right up here in the local town center to rezone it for affordable housing. And there's also some real big box stores that they want to rezone and put in there as well. And they're going to proceed full speed with that without doing any type of revised traffic studies or any other input, because it's the old NIMBY principle, not in my backyard, and since it's north of the freeway, it's not going to impact them. So I really urge you, if you are concerned about having any tremendous amount of traffic flying on St. Cloud and Montecito, any affordable housing right up next to your neighborhood, that you voice your opinion to the Seal Beach City Council at their next meeting via emails and phone calls and voicemails. And that's all I have.
I would echo the same on the last item you brought up. I think the Homeowners Association will be another focal point to direct attention as well, such that they would consider putting this on their agenda for next Tuesday night, a week from tonight, such that the community can speak to their concerns on the idea of creating new housing in that shopping center, which I don't understand how they're going to facilitate the additional parking. One side effect is, as we see also with the Seal Beach condominiums on Montecito, many of those residents have a 1 or 2 car garage. Most of them are 2 car garages, and they've found that even with the 2 car garage, that is an ample space for storage, and so a lot of the residents will park their cars on the street of Rossmoor, which is an impairment to our street sweeping. It also takes away from the parking availability as the Rossmoor residents around the Rossmoor Park feel, but the people around Mainway and the streets south down Montecito feel the same pain because the extra vehicle is in front of their house. And it takes away from their ability to have guests and or their own household to park there. They're not giving consideration to that. Plus as well, Rossmoor Shopping Center Way, which is that main artery from Seal Beach Boulevard to Montecito, is, I believe, inadequate to address the traffic needs.
And there's no parking study. None.
That too.
They're going off something that's decades old. It's ridiculous.
So that once that rezoning takes place, it's cast in steel, and it is what it is. It's a taking with a little positive attributes that come from it. Thank you, Mr. Tabawada, your staff, for planting those trees on Wallingsford. I noticed that today. Looks great.
2, 4.
I love it. So thank you very much for addressing that. And they're nice, healthy-sized trees. With regards to curb and gutter, I don't think the public knows, but there are remedies to call the county. And I do know that at the corner of Shakespeare and Orangewood, 3201 Orangewood. There is broken curb there that's been there for years. I was wondering if there'd be any way we could assist the residents by making a request the county fix the curb. It's broken off in two chunks, approximately 18 inches in length. It's just sitting there. It looks horrible.
Wow.
They've attempted to sell their houses on several occasions, and that house is not sold, but it certainly is an eyesore to pull up and see the curb, not the gutter, but the curb broken. So if there'd be any way for the staff to find time to make a call and send it to the requisite department.
We can certainly do that, Mr. President.
Thank you. Other than that, thank you very much for the work you're doing on the tennis courts and doing it right. I have nothing further. Unless there is something else, we have no closed session tonight. And just a motion for adjournment.
So motioned.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That closes our meeting.